Marcus Thompson was merely a widowed father fighting to endure the brutal season until he spotted two sets of miniature tracks disappearing onto the frozen surface, with none returning. That instant transformed everything. What unfolded afterward defied all expectations. Not the astonishing rescue, not the unexpected romance, and especially not the convoy of 10 black limousines that arrived at his doorstep days later. Before we share this remarkable tale of bravery, compassion, and fresh beginnings, if you hold that even the smallest gesture of kindness can transform someone's existence, please consider following our channel. We share authentic, inspiring narratives that touch souls and remind us what truly counts: love, faith, and the courage to act when others won't. The harsh gusts penetrated through gaps in the aged wooden frames, pulling at the edges of worn curtains like a restless toddler. Beyond the glass, snowflakes descended in heavy, soundless layers, covering the meadows in pristine white, erasing every jagged feature of Marcus Thompson's rough existence. Within the modest farmhouse, Marcus stirred a pot of deer stew on the burner, the rich aroma fighting against the encroaching cold. His plaid shirt, mended at both elbows, drooped loosely on his slender build. Existence had carved him down to bare necessities, sufficient to survive, nothing more or less. "Tyler, boots by the entrance," he called without glancing back. A pair of snow-covered boots hit the floor with a solid thump, followed by the rhythmic stamping of an 11-year-old attempting to shed winter's grip. "Dad," Tyler gasped out of breath, "I witnessed something strange near the pond." Marcus froze, wooden ladle suspended midair. Strange in what way? Footprints appeared, tiny ones, heading toward the ice, but none returning. Marcus's grip tightened around the spoon handle. He placed it down carefully, snatched his jacket from the peg, and reached the door in two quick strides. "Show me exactly." The pond stretched just past the tree boundary behind their storage building, a crystalline surface consumed by the blizzard. Snow continued falling heavily, yet Marcus could discern the minute tracks. Two trails side by side, almost impossibly small to be genuine. "Might be wildlife," he whispered, dropping to his knees. Yet his breathing stopped short. No hoof marks, no creature signs, just two sets of child-sized footwear leading straight toward the center of the icy pond, with nothing coming back. Without hesitation, Marcus began running. The ice protested under his weight, creaking ominously. Winter had arrived early, too soon for solid freezing. Each step felt like bargaining between survival and death. "Hello," he yelled into the screaming wind. "Anyone out there?" Then he detected it, a weak, shrill sound resembling a child's weeping from beneath heavy covers. He collapsed to his knees, pressing his ear against the ice. "Help!" The cry was muffled and distant, but undeniably real, emanating directly below him. Marcus didn't hesitate. He didn't consider probabilities or await assistance. He lifted his elbow and struck the ice repeatedly until the surface cracked in intricate patterns, then burst with a tremendous roar as frigid water rushed around him. He dove in. The cold snatched his breath like a blow to the ribs, but he suppressed the panic. He could see them. Two small girls, eyes wide with terror, trapped beneath the surface. He stretched out, heart racing. His frozen fingers scraped against slick ice, searching desperately for grip, for entry. One hand caught a delicate wrist, then another. He pulled with every ounce of strength he possessed. When Tyler witnessed his father disappear beneath the surface, he sprinted faster than ever before. The snow bit his face, but he didn't pause until he located the emergency radio in the storage barn. "Two girls," he shouted into the device, hands trembling. "My dad's in the pond." He jumped in. "Please send help, immediately." By the time emergency responders arrived, Marcus had succeeded in dragging both girls to the shore. He slumped there, soaked completely, cradling the unconscious children against him. His lips were blue, his body convulsing uncontrollably, but he refused to release them. The lead paramedic knelt beside him. "Sir, we'll take over now." Marcus shook his head weakly. Don't let them get cold again." Later in the hospital emergency room's warmth, A nurse provided Marcus with a blanket and steaming coffee. Tyler sat next to him, his small hand gripping his father's with surprising force. "Will they recover?" Tyler asked. Marcus gazed toward the room where the girls were being treated. Their clothing had been threadbare, their skin pale and showing early signs of frostbite, but they were breathing. "I believe so," Marcus said quietly. "They're secure now." What about their parents? That question lingered in the air like visible breath in winter. Nobody had come searching. Nobody had telephoned. The girls had spoken little, only their names, Luna and Stella, twins, sisters. When asked about their mother, Luna had only murmured, "She's weeping somewhere among the trees." Back at the farmhouse that evening, Marcus couldn't find sleep. Tyler lay on the sofa, curled beneath a quilt. The fireplace crackled, throwing dancing light across the aged wooden walls. Marcus stood by the window, staring toward the pond, now concealed beneath darkness and fresh snowfall. He couldn't comprehend what kind of world would permit two small girls to wander alone onto ice. He didn't know who they belonged to or why nobody was seeking them. But he understood one truth. They hadn't perished today, and sometimes that was sufficient to begin anew. Marcus hadn't truly slept, just fragments of visions and recollections flickering like dying coals in a stove that wouldn't ignite. At 4:17 a.m., he abandoned pretending. He pulled on his boots, slipped into his old coat, and stepped into the frigid Montana morning. The air stung his face. The sky remained ink black and starless. The pond gleamed in the distance like a barely healed wound. Behind him, the farmhouse stood silent except for occasional wooden creaks or Tyler's gentle breathing. But something about the night felt incomplete, like an unfinished sentence hanging in space. The hospital had discharged the twins just hours ago. Their conditions had stabilized. No evidence of brain injury. A miracle, the nurse had declared, though Marcus didn't believe in miracles. Not anymore. They slept now, nestled together on the fold-out couch in the living room, tiny hands intertwined even in dreams, as if fearing the other might disappear. Marcus had offered them the warmest spot in the house, built up the fire to its brightest, and remained close all evening. Neither girl had requested toys or bedtime stories. They had posed only one question: will she locate us? When Marcus gently inquired who she was, Luna had gazed up at him with eyes too old for a 6-year-old and said, "Mama was crying, but she instructed us to flee." Standing beside the frozen pond now, Marcus felt the burden of their silence more than the snow. He examined the tree line, empty. The girls hadn't mentioned a name, a place, a destination, only that their mother was somewhere out there, weeping. He squatted by the pond's edge, tracing where the ice had shattered, now frozen again beneath fresh snow. The thought of them trapped beneath that surface, their small fingers pressed against the ice, twisted something profound within him. "Why were they alone here?" he murmured aloud. "Where were you?" The wind offered no response. By the time Marcus returned to the farmhouse, dawn was spreading across the sky, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. He quietly removed his boots, not wanting to wake anyone, but someone was already awake. Luna sat at the kitchen table, her tiny legs swinging, wearing one of Tyler's old sweatshirts. Her face remained pale, lips dry, but her eyes were alert. "I had a nightmare," she said softly, "but it was a true one." Marcus poured her warm milk and sat across from her. "Would you like to share it?" Luna hesitated. There was shouting. Mama said to run. She was frightened. Marcus leaned forward. "Where were you before the pond?" "Snow, trees, a car that stopped working." He frowned. "Did your mother have a telephone?" "She threw it." That surprised him. "She threw it?" Luna nodded as if it were perfectly normal. "She said someone was chasing us. Then she told me and Stella to run toward the water. She said it was safer than staying with her." Marcus exhaled slowly, something stirring within him. The instincts that had once preserved lives as a firefighter began awakening again. She wasn't simply lost. She was hiding. Later that morning, Marcus loaded the children, Tyler, Luna, and Stella, into his weathered pickup and drove into town. He didn't want to contact child services yet, not until he learned more, not until he knew the mother wasn't in danger. At the sheriff's office, he completed a brief report. The deputy, a younger man with excessive cologne and insufficient compassion, nodded absently. "We'll issue a bulletin," he said. "Check if anyone's filed missing persons, but if nobody's reported them missing, maybe she abandoned them." Marcus stared at him. "She didn't abandon them." The deputy shrugged. "You'd be amazed how frequently it occurs." Marcus departed without another word. Back at the farm, the girls played with Tyler in the loft, laughter echoing like something holy. Marcus stood in the barn entrance, arms folded, heart caught in his throat. He hadn't heard such laughter in years, not since Sarah had died. Tyler was different with the girls, more gentle, more expressive, as if something inside him had awakened, something Marcus hadn't realized was missing. But he couldn't forget the expression in Luna's eyes, that knowledge, that trauma, too heavy for a child. Just after sunset, as Marcus chopped wood out back, he saw her, a figure at the forest edge, small, hunched, motionless. He froze, heart pounding. The axe slipped from his grasp. The figure took one unsteady step forward. She appeared ghost-like, her hair tangled, coat torn at the sleeves, face streaked with cold and tears. Her eyes locked onto his, haunted, hollow. Then she whispered, hoarse and broken, "Are they safe?" She looked as if she hadn't slept in days. Rebecca Martinez stood at the edge of Marcus's property like a deer beside a highway, ready to flee but too exhausted to move. Her clothes clung to her frame, damp and wind-torn. Scratches covered her hands, a tear marked one knee of her jeans, and her lips were so chapped they bled. But her eyes stopped Marcus cold. They were wild with fear and filled with something even deeper. Shame. He took a cautious step forward. "They're safe," he said gently. "Inside warm." Rebecca swayed, then steadied herself against a low pine branch. Her breath formed white clouds in the cold evening air. "Both of them?" He nodded. "Both." She covered her mouth with both hands, and for a moment, her body simply folded inward, shoulders shaking, not from cold, but from relief. "They're okay," she whispered. "They're truly okay." Marcus wanted to ask countless questions. Why she'd fled, why she'd sent two little girls across a frozen pond, why she hadn't come sooner. But none of that mattered now. The important thing was that she was here, alive, and asking about her daughters. He removed his coat and extended it. "You look like you're freezing." She hesitated, then accepted it. Her hands trembled as she slipped it on, the sleeves hanging too long on her arms. She clutched the collar like armor. "I didn't know where else to go," she said quietly. "I was trying to keep them safe." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "You did," he said. "They're safe now." Back inside the farmhouse, the moment Rebecca walked through the door, the room seemed to pause. Luna and Stella were playing quietly with Tyler near the fire. When they saw her, their faces illuminated in unison. "Mama!" Both girls rushed toward her with small cries that could have melted the coldest heart. Rebecca dropped to her knees and gathered them in her arms, sobbing freely now. Her fingers traced their hair, their faces, their hands, touching them as if to confirm they were real. "My babies, oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." They clung to her like vines to a tree, whispering, "We knew you'd come, and we waited, Mama." Marcus stood by the kitchen counter, watching the reunion with something heavy and indescribable settling on his chest. For a moment he thought of Sarah, how she died in that hospital bed, how Tyler had waited by her bedside for days, and how nobody could bring her back. But here someone had returned. Later, after the girls had fallen asleep, curled against her on the couch, Marcus brought Rebecca a cup of tea. She looked at it as though it might burn her, but she accepted it with a soft, "Thank you." They sat across from each other in the quiet. The fire crackled. Outside, the snow had slowed to a gentle whisper. I should have come sooner, she said, staring into the flames. But I wasn't certain if it was safe. Marcus didn't push. He waited. My name's Rebecca Martinez, she said after a long silence. You've probably heard it, or maybe you haven't. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Martinez, like the restaurant chain? She gave a hollow laugh. Exactly like the restaurants. My father built the empire. My late husband helped manage it. And I was supposed to inherit it all, but I walked away. Marcus absorbed that information. The name meant nothing to him personally. He hadn't dined anywhere fancier than a roadside diner in a decade, but he understood the weight of legacy and the burden of being expected to fulfill someone else's dreams. I married a man who kept our lives polished on the surface, she continued, but underneath, he was broken, and he broke things slowly, quietly, mostly me. She looked up, eyes red but steady. He died 4 years ago in a car accident. Everyone thought it was tragic, but for me and the girls, it was complicated. Marcus nodded once. He didn't speak. He knew what it meant to love someone and lose them, and still not be certain whether the grief came from love or relief. I tried to rebuild, Rebecca said, but his former business partner, someone I trusted, started appearing too often, saying too many things, making threats about custody, about what was best for my girls. And I knew we had to leave. So you ran, Marcus said softly. She looked at him, eyes glistening. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Far enough until the car broke down in the snow and I panicked. I didn't think anyone would believe me if I told the truth. So I told the girls to run toward the lights. I thought maybe someone would find them. You thought correctly, he said. For a long moment they just sat there. Two strangers, two survivors, two people who had once known fire and now lived in the ashes of what came after. Then Rebecca said, almost to herself, you didn't have to do what you did. You didn't have to go into that pond. Marcus stared into his tea. Yeah, but they didn't have to be in that pond either. When she looked at him again, something had shifted in her eyes. Not just gratitude, something deeper, like trust taking its first cautious step. Thank you, Marcus Thompson, she said, for not asking questions when I had no answers. He stood. You don't owe me anything. But Rebecca shook her head, tears threatening again. I owe you everything. Morning arrived quietly. No alarms, no voices, just the soft rustle of flannel sheets and the distant call of a crow perched on the frost-covered fence post outside. The farmhouse held its breath in that golden hour between first light and full awakening, as if even time was reluctant to disturb the peace. Rebecca was the first to stir. She lay on the couch, still wrapped in Marcus's coat, with Luna and Stella nestled tightly against her sides like twin vines clinging to a tree. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, her shoulders weren't rigid with fear. Her body, though aching, had allowed itself to rest. She blinked toward the fire. It had been maintained through the night. Someone had added more logs while she slept. Marcus. She sat up slowly, not wanting to wake the girls. On the coffee table beside her lay a folded blanket, a glass of water, and a short handwritten note. Take the morning. They're safe. Double quote. She read it twice, simple, quiet, and impossibly kind. In the kitchen, Marcus stood over the stove, flipping pancakes with the kind of skill that only came from years of necessity. Tyler sat at the table, swinging his legs and reading a comic book, his hair sticking up in every direction. You didn't have to make breakfast, Rebecca said, stepping in, her voice still rough from sleep. Marcus looked over his shoulder, spatula in hand. You didn't have to say thank you, he replied and turned back to the pan. She allowed herself a small smile. Then I guess we're even. Tyler grinned. Dad never made pancakes like this. Marcus nudged him with a knuckle. That's because your dad never liked waking up early. Rebecca's eyes flickered. She didn't ask, but Marcus caught the glance. He poured more batter onto the skillet. She passed away when Tyler was 7. Cancer. Took 6 months. We haven't seen anyone since. Rebecca's lips parted slightly. I'm so sorry. He shrugged. We've got what we need. Tyler chimed in without looking up. Yeah, we've got pancakes. They ate around the small wooden table. Marcus, Rebecca, Tyler, Luna, and Stella. A group of strangers slowly becoming something else. The twins were still a little quiet, still holding on to their mother's sleeves while they chewed. But their eyes were brighter. Their laughter came more freely now, especially when Tyler told a joke about aliens and farm animals that made no logical sense but got giggles anyway. After breakfast, Marcus slipped on his boots and coat. I'll go check the water lines near the barn. Pipes have a habit of freezing if I so much as look away. I'll come with you, Rebecca offered before she could second-guess herself. Marcus raised an eyebrow, surprised. You sure? I think I need the air. And maybe I want to see what survival looks like outside of boardrooms and conference calls. Tyler wrinkled his nose. What's a conference call? Marcus smirked. A tool adults use to pretend they're important. Rebecca chuckled. He's not wrong. Outside, the snow crunched beneath their boots. The air was sharp, but the sun peeked through the clouds in pale ribbons, softening the edges of everything. Marcus led her past the barn toward the older outbuilding, where the water pipes wound like metal veins beneath the earth. You've accomplished a lot with very little, she said, glancing around. Depends who you ask, Marcus replied. Some folks see a broken fence. I see a fence that still stands. She nodded, thoughtful. I used to think success meant skyscrapers, private jets. But I look at this place and think, maybe I got it wrong. Marcus stopped beside the pipe housing, squatting to check the line. This place was built by my grandfather's hands. Every nail, every board. He taught me that life doesn't ask for flash. It asks for steady. Rebecca stood beside him in silence. That word, steady, echoed in her chest. She'd built a life on momentum, on power lunches and red-eye flights and headlines. But in all that speed, she'd never once felt still, never once felt safe, until now. As they walked back to the house, she said quietly, I'm not sure how long we can stay. Marcus didn't answer right away. You don't have to figure it all out today. I'm not used to not having answers. You're a mother. You've already given the most important answer there is. She tilted her head. What's that? That they're worth everything. He said it without flinching, without expecting anything in return, and it undid something in her. That night after the kids had gone to bed, Rebecca stood at the window in the living room, gazing out at the snow-covered pasture. Marcus sat in the armchair behind her, mending a tear in Tyler's coat with careful, calloused fingers. They've stopped asking if we're going home, she said softly. Marcus looked up. Do you want to? She didn't answer right away. Then she turned toward him. Number? Not yet. He nodded. Then don't. She crossed the room, sat across from him on the ottoman. I never said thank you. Not really. You don't need to. I do. She took a breath. You saved them and me without even knowing who we were. Marcus looked at her, steady as ever. Sometimes it doesn't matter who. Only that. They sat there in the quiet, the fire between them. Two people not yet in love, but moving towards something that felt an awful lot like it. Not with fireworks, not with declarations, but with presence, with kindness, with the kind of gratitude that didn't need to be spoken aloud to be understood. That night the wind picked up again, whistling low and constant across the empty plains, like a hymn only the prairie remembered. Inside the farmhouse, the storm was just a distant murmur behind thick walls and old wood. The living room was quiet. The children had fallen asleep hours ago. Tyler curled up under the patchwork quilt his grandmother had made, and the twins tucked safely in the small guest room Marcus had cleared out for them. The fire in the hearth cast long shadows across the floor, flickering like old memories. Rebecca sat cross-legged on the braided rug, sipping from a chipped mug of chamomile tea. Marcus knelt beside the hearth, feeding another log into the fire. Neither of them spoke for a while, not because there was nothing to say, but because the silence between them had grown comfortable, earned, not empty. I always thought fireplaces were just for decoration, Rebecca said at last, breaking the stillness. At least the ones we had in Chicago. They were gas-powered, controlled by remote. Marcus smiled faintly. Ain't much comfort in fake flames. No, she said softly. There isn't. She took another sip, then looked into the fire. I used to think control was everything. That if I could organize enough, plan well enough, lead strong enough, I could stop the bad things from happening. Marcus stirred the logs gently with the poker. Sparks lifted like fireflies into the chimney. And did it work? Rebecca let out a bitter laugh. Not harsh, just tired. Not even close. Marcus leaned back against the stone hearth, stretching out his legs. You said your husband passed away 4 years ago? Was it sudden? She nodded. Car accident, late at night. He'd been drinking. That part was never in the papers, of course. I'm sorry. He was complicated, she said, her voice cautious. To the world he was charming, brilliant, but at home, she hesitated. He wasn't cruel, not in the ways people expect, just cold, distant, controlling in the quietest ways. So quiet I didn't even notice until I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't interrupt. I stayed for the girls, told myself they needed stability, but then I saw how Luna flinched when voices got too loud, how Stella started hiding under the table when her dad walked in the room. Rebecca's eyes glistened. That was my wake-up call. I took them and left. I had money, connections, but I also had a target on my back. Marcus rubbed a hand over his face. So you ran, not just from danger, but from everything familiar. She nodded again. And now I'm here, in a house with broken floorboards, a fire that actually needs tending, and a man who risked his life for my children before he even knew their names. He gave a half shrug, almost embarrassed. You showed up in the middle of my winter. I'm sorry for that. Don't be, he said. Winter needed breaking. A long pause followed. The fire popped gently. Somewhere in the hallway, the wooden floor groaned under the weight of time. Then Rebecca asked quietly, What about you? You said Tyler's mom died. Marcus looked into the fire for a long time before speaking. We met young, married quick, thought love was something you could build out of promises and baby clothes. But life got harder after Tyler was born. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She got sick when Tyler was 6. Cancer. I kept thinking if I could just do more, work harder, pay for better doctors. I can't imagine, Rebecca said, her voice thick with empathy. You find a way to keep going, he said, mostly for him. At first I kept the hospital room exactly like she left it, thinking she might come back somehow. After a year, I packed everything away. That was my way of letting go. Rebecca looked at him, not as a stranger, but as someone who had lived parallel pain. Do you ever wish you could go back and fix it? Marcus shook his head. No, but I do wish I'd asked more questions while I still had the chance. The clock ticked past midnight. Neither moved to leave. Then Marcus stood slowly. There's something I want to show you. She followed him through the narrow hallway and into the small den at the back of the house. He opened an old cedar chest and carefully pulled out a well-worn journal. This was my father, he said. He was a fireman, too. Wrote in this every day for 20 years. He handed it to her. Rebecca opened it gently, flipping past pages filled with faded ink. Sketches of tools, handwritten prayers, even a recipe for chili scribbled in the margins. He always said, a man's legacy isn't what he builds. It's what he leaves behind for someone else to carry. She closed the book, holding it carefully like something sacred. That's beautiful. I used to think I didn't have anything to leave behind. Now I'm not so sure. She looked at him, something unspoken passing between them. Not quite love, not yet, but the first stirrings of something real, something that could take root in the soil of shared scars and quiet courage. Back in the living room, the fire had died down to embers. I should let you rest, Marcus said. Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. Thank you for tonight, for everything. He gave her a long look. You're not a burden here, Rebecca. She swallowed hard. That might be the kindest thing anyone said to me in years. Then she turned and walked down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the wood floor. Marcus watched her disappear into the dark, then sat down beside the fire, his fingers still warm from where they'd brushed hers when she closed the journal. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The quiet didn't last. It never does. Not when someone's past is built on headlines and inheritance. It started with a humming in the air. Not something Marcus could explain, just a shift in the way the wind moved across the field. A pressure behind his ears, like the silence before a storm. He was out by the barn mending the gate that Tyler had knocked loose with the sled the day before when he heard it. Engines. Not the old truck kind. Smooth, powerful, coordinated. He stood up slowly, squinting toward the horizon. And then he saw them. 10 black luxury SUVs moving in a quiet procession down the snow-covered road. Tires crunching softly like whispers in a church. It wasn't just the number of vehicles that raised Marcus's pulse. It was the way they moved, deliberate, like a convoy, like someone important was inside. The gate slipped from his hand. Inside the farmhouse, Rebecca was standing by the kitchen sink, sleeves rolled up, humming softly to herself as she washed the breakfast plates. Luna and Stella were coloring on the floor. Tyler was building a tower out of cereal boxes. Marcus walked in fast, his boots still coated in frost, his expression tight, unreadable. Rebecca, she turned, smile fading the instant she saw his face. What is it? You need to look outside. She stepped to the window and froze. The color drained from her face. Oh, God, she whispered. Marcus stood beside her, arms crossed. Friends of yours? No, she said. Not friends. Not even close. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, then turned toward the twins. Girls, come with me. Luna blinked. Are we leaving? No, sweetie, she said gently. Just going to the bedroom for a little while. Tyler, would you stay with them? Tyler nodded, already sensing the tension in the room. Rebecca paused before leaving, her hand brushing lightly against Marcus's sleeve. Please don't let them take me until I've had a chance to explain. When the knock came, it wasn't a hard one. It was polite. 2 raps, sharp, like something you'd hear outside a corporate boardroom instead of a farmhouse door. Marcus opened it. The man on the other side wore a long wool coat, gray hair slicked back, a subtle earpiece tucked behind his left ear. He wasn't a cop, he wasn't press, but Marcus recognized power when he saw it. Marcus Thompson, the man asked. Marcus didn't answer. I'm David Whitman. I represent the Martinez family office. I believe you've been sheltering Rebecca Martinez and her daughters. Marcus leaned against the doorframe. They needed help. Of course, Whitman said, nodding slightly. And now we're here to relieve you of that responsibility. Marcus's jaw tensed. You make it sound like they're a burden. They're not, Whitman said calmly. They're high-profile individuals in a delicate situation. Mrs. Martinez has been under significant scrutiny. Our team is here to ensure their return is discreet and safe. Marcus glanced past the man. The other SUVs sat idle, men in black coats milling about like shadows. Then he saw her, Rebecca, standing in the hallway behind him, her shoulders squared, but her hands shaking at her sides. You can come in, she said, her voice clear but low. But only if you're here to listen. The living room suddenly felt too small for so many people. Whitman stood stiffly across from Rebecca, while Marcus remained close, not looming, but present. You weren't supposed to run, Whitman said, tone more disappointed than angry. I wasn't supposed to hand over my children like they were business assets, Rebecca snapped. He was threatening custody. You knew that. I knew it was complicated. No, she said, voice rising. You knew it was dangerous. And you did nothing. Whitman's silence spoke volumes. Marcus stepped forward. If she doesn't want to go with you, she stays. You understand that, right? This isn't about what she wants. Whitman said quietly. It's about what will happen when the media gets wind of this. About the company, the board, the lawsuits waiting to happen. Rebecca's voice cut through the room like glass. Let them come. Let them sue. I'll stand up in every court in America and tell them exactly what I did and why. And what about the girl? Whitman asked. Do you really think hiding out in the middle of nowhere is a long-term solution? No, Marcus said calmly. But sometimes the middle of nowhere is the first place healing starts. Whitman studied them both, then sighed and pulled out a folder. I was instructed to offer this. Terms for a return. Full public relations cover, control over narrative, private education for the girls, total legal protection. Rebecca didn't even look at it. I have everything I need right here. She reached down, took Marcus's hand quietly without performance. Just honesty, strength. And in that moment, the balance of power in the room shifted. Whitman closed the folder. We'll be in touch. He left without another word. Later that evening, as the last of the SUVs disappeared down the snowy road, Rebecca stood on the porch beside Marcus. You didn't have to stand up for me, she said. He glanced sideways. You didn't have to come back for them. She looked up at the stars. I used to think I had to choose between being a mother and being free. But maybe freedom was always here, in the quiet, in the people who ask nothing of me but truth. Marcus didn't say anything. He just slipped his arm gently around her shoulder. And for the first time in years, Rebecca leaned into someone without fear of falling. The next morning, the world looked the same. Snow blanketed the fields in its usual hush. The barn creaked under its own weight, and smoke curled softly from the chimney of the little farmhouse. But inside, everything had changed. Marcus knew it the moment he stepped into the kitchen. Rebecca was already there, wearing Tyler's oversized flannel shirt over her own clothes, pouring coffee like she'd done it 100 times. Not like a guest, not like someone passing through, like someone who'd stayed. Morning, she said, offering him a cup. He took it wordlessly, his fingers brushing hers. You sleep okay? She smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. Like a rock. Marcus took a sip, studying her in the morning light. The tension that had shadowed her face since the day they met was softer now. Not gone, but quieter. As if overnight she'd laid down a burden she no longer believed was hers to carry alone. She sat down across from him, wrapping her hands around her mug.